an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Vorkosagin Saga, Book Something, Cetaganda, Chapters 5 and 6. In these chapters, I was right, I guess, that these hot ladies are so unbelievable that they can get otherwise sensible gentlemen to do very silly things. I'm looking at you, Miles. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to, Brett? Brett for commissioning this episode. I almost said last name, but no. Brett, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Y'all, I looked on the calendar, and if things had been going according to our original plan, today I would have covered chapters 9 through 11, and I've got to admit I had a little pang when I saw that, but this was the right call. It definitely was, but you know. So all right, I'm going to have to start from the beginning on this, as much as I desperately want to go right into the thing. Let's start at the beginning. So Miles and Ivan are going to Lord Yenaro's party. They have some backup with a medic, you know, like there's a whole prep team ready to go in case some shit goes wrong. They don't expect that there's something overt that's going to happen, but there is a possibility, and they're just wanting to be prepared. So this is what I found interesting. They get out of the car, and there is a description of genteel poverty. Damaged gates and walls, overgrown shrubbery, what appeared to be 3/4 of the mansion dark and closed off. Left the house, but not the means to keep it up, having consumed his capital in his extended and presumably embittered old age. Yenaro's been in sole possession for about 4 years. He runs with an artsy crowd of young and unemployed gem lordlings, so his story holds up to that extent. But that thing in the Marilacan Embassy's lobby was the first sculpture Yenaro's ever been known to produce. Curiously advanced for a first try, don't you think? So, you guys, I just want to address that I had said, I don't think Yenaro did it. He seemed genuinely embarrassed by it. I appear to have been wrong. I think that as this is, like, everything is adding up to no, indeed, he definitely was the one to do it. And there's like an interesting moment later on when he is showing Miles his lab, and Miles is trying to reconcile this man who is extremely involved in all of the creation of the fragrances that he it's not just perfumes, there's also like an incense that's burning. And basically, Miles is like, this guy said, hands are to be hired. You don't do things yourself. But here he is, getting his hands dirty, making all of this stuff. So I think he's full of shit. And I think that he's right. I really, bought this guy's act. And I think also part of it, I'll be honest, is that the voice actor who does Yenaro's voice comes across really, really believable in his sort of panicked embarrassment. And think I took the voice actor at face value when he's just doing his best to be a good narrator. That's not necessarily what I'm saying is I don't know that the person doing the narration knows ahead of time whether Yanaro is a bad guy or not. And I'm not sure that he would have changed the delivery of that line if he did. But I just, wanted to admit that I think I was way off here. There's a possibility I'm still right and that this is all a big misdirect, but I really don't think so at this point. And I want to jump back to the spot in, I think, the second chapter where I had said in the last episode there might be some bad blood that Miles sort of like sets to the side and is like, I guess he's not worried about that, but that Miles had been afraid Yanaro was bringing up initially in the conversation. And I wanted to just reread this section. So Miles and Ivan return decent nods. We have historical connection, Lord Vorkosigan, Yanaro went on. Famous ancestors. You are the grandson of General Count Pyotr Vorkosigan, are you not? But Miles anticipated, oh damn, this is some relative of the late Gem General Astanis, and he is out to get the son of Errol Vorkosigan. Gem General Astanis. So this is, I feel like, something I'm supposed to know about, and I don't remember what this is. Is this like, I don't even remember this name coming up in Cordelia's books. So just wanted to it's possible that I'm not actually supposed to know this, but just on the off chance that this is something that I'm meant to have remembered and didn't, I wanted to put it out there. So I'm starting to wonder if there is bad blood about that, or if this is like a completely different, separate thing. I don't know. Vicky says, I don't think the name has come up before. Okay. I just want to make sure that I'm not missing things that I'm supposed to catch. So, okay, they're going inside, and it says, Miles felt intensely conscious of the rod now riding concealed in his inner tunic pocket. He'd been carrying the great key in secret all day. Through a tour of the city and an interminable afternoon performance of a Cetagandan classical dance company. You guys, I love dance. I enjoy watching dancing a lot, more than I think average probably. But being forced to watch a company that has been sort of prescribed by like officials and it being like an entire afternoon, that really sounds rough. That's a lot. So they are met by a servant and ushered inside. Miles had chosen to wear his ultra-formal house blacks. He wasn't sure how Yanaro would interpret the message as honor or reminder. I'm the official envoy or warning, don't mess with me. But he was fairly certain it was not a nuance Yanaro would miss. So as soon as he shows up, Yanaro's like, are your legs better? And it just felt like sort of rubbing it in, but it also could have been such an innocent inquiry. I was like, am I turning this dude into bitch eating crackers just because I'm now suspicious of him? I don't know. And there's this incense burner that has a blend where he's asked by Ivan, is it your perfume? And he says, and a bit extra. That mixture also contains a mild relaxant suitable to the occasion. You perhaps would not care for it, Lord Vorkosigan. What exactly did that mean? What is that? So the assumption later on that both Ivan and Vorkosigan, I shouldn't call him that because that's his dad, that Miles makes, is that whatever it was that rendered Ivan unable to perform. I was trying to find the very delicate way to put it that he does, and I think that's the way he phrases it. That it was in this drink, but I'm sort of wondering if it wasn't in the, well, because I was going to say the incense, but like, I don't know that everybody else, why would he want to affect everybody with that? So probably not, right? I don't know. Anyway, so he goes upstairs and there's like this young woman that also goes with them who is interested in some perfume that he has promised her, apparently. The two tallest and most striking Gem women present, a leggy blonde and a truly incredible redhead, were standing together across the room. Ivan somehow managed to make eye contact with both, and they favored him with inviting smiles. Miles sent up a short, silent prayer to the guardian god of fools, lovers, and madmen. So it becomes quite clear why they were so enthusiastic about him a little bit later. And I cannot help but giggle a little bit over it because it really is a perfect way to get at each of them. The way that Miles was humiliated and the way that Ivan has been humiliated. I really have to admire the approach. Like, just subtle enough, but just aggressive enough. It's really perfect levels of passive aggression. And passive aggressiveness, you guys, it's really difficult to cope with. Like, for me specifically, I find it utterly infuriating. And so I would not get along with these people. I would be getting played left and right because I would not know how to handle shit. So let's see. Yeah, here it is. How did this square with the man who'd claimed hands are to be hired? Not at all, Miles decided with concealed satisfaction. Yanaro was unquestionably an artist, but an artist of Esther's, not a sculptor. Someone else had supplied the undoubted technical expertise that had produced the fountain, and had that same somebody also supplied the technical information on Miles' personal weaknesses? Let's call him Lord X. One fact about Lord X: he had access to Cetaganda Security's most detailed reports on Baryarans of military or political significance and their sons. And fact 2, he had a subtle mind. Fact 3, there was no fact 3 yet. So when they go back downstairs, these women are clustered around Ivan and really just like encouraging him quite a bit. And Yanaro goes and gets some drinks. Lord Vorpatrol, he nodded at Ivan. I believe you appreciate your beverages. Do try this one. And he's got this pitcher, and Miles is watching it, already very paranoid about the possibility of poisoning. And I have to admit, I really didn't think this was likely. I understood his paranoia, and I appreciated it, but I really didn't think it was something to worry about. And so when it's like, he does a toast and then drinks some, and it says, Miles watched closely to be sure Yanaro actually swallowed. He did. 5 different methods for presenting deadly drinks with just that maneuver and still being sure the victim received the right one, including the trick of the host consuming the antidote first, flashed through Miles's mind. But if he was going to be that paranoid, they ought not to have come here in the first place. Yet he'd eaten and drunk nothing himself so far. So what are you going to do? Wait and see if Ivan falls over first and then try it? But later on, he isn't drinking and just like presses something to his lips without actually. So yeah, apparently he is just going to be completely on his guard. And he gets a closer look at Ivan's cup over his shoulder. Stop breathing up my neck. Go have a good time, Miles. So eventually Miles tries to go mingle. And it doesn't go super well. This is a really interesting, like, the description of these guys, it reminds me of when you watch like a period piece, especially in things that are set in sort of 1910, 1920. And an English gentleman is asked what his profession is, and they reply with gentleman. That's the deal with these guys. The only expertise they displayed was in witty commentary upon the personal lives of their equally idle compatriots, their clothes, various love affairs, and the mismanagement thereof, sports, all spectator, none participatory, and mainly of interest due to wagers on the outcome, and the assorted latest commercial feely dreams and other offerings, including erotic ones. This retreat from reality seemed to absorb by far the bulk of the Gemlordlings' time and attention. Not one of them offered a word about anything of political or military interest. Hell, Ivan had more mental clout. It was all a bit depressing. Inaro's friends were excluded men, wasted wastrels. No one was excited about a career or service. They had none. Even the arts received only a ripple of interest. They were strictly feely dream consumers, not producers. All in all, it was probably a good thing these youths had no political interests. They were just the sort of people who started revolutions but could not finish them, their idealism betrayed by their incompetence. Miles had met similar young men among the Vor, third or fourth sons, who for whatever reason had not gained entry to a traditional military career, living as pensioners upon their families. But even they could look forward to some change in their status by midlife. Given the average Gem lifespan, any chance of ascent up the social ladder by inheritance was still some 80 or 90 years off for most of Yanaro's set. They weren't inherently stupid. Their genetics did not permit it, but their minds were damped down to some artificial horizon. Beneath the air of hectic sophistication, their lives were frozen in place. Miles almost shivered. This is what I think a lot of people picture happening if everybody were to be given like a universal basic income. Is like everybody becoming essentially shiftless, aimless, and just sort of taking up space without actually appreciating their lives or feeling motivated to accomplish, or, you know what I mean? But I think that this is a very specific thing that only can happen if you have truly absolute excess. This is not my needs, my basic needs are being met and freeing me up. This is more than my basic needs are being met to a degree that I don't want for absolutely anything. And because there's no like careers or anything like this, the only way to one up each other is the sort of like social barbs, you know, that sort of reputation kind of that I'm trying to find the way to say this, but it just, for me, it's just so boring. Like, I can't imagine just not wanting to make anything of my own. And I think it's really interesting that Yanaro seems to be the only one. He's over here making perfumes and things, and it seems like these folks don't, you know, as he mentions, even the arts only produced a ripple of interest. Like, it feels like Yanaro is very much outside of this social set in his way. And I wonder why that is. And I have to assume it's because they don't have the money that these other folks have. Like, he's invited his alleged social peers, but it seems like they are not his financial peers. It seems like he is in a rougher place than them. And so he needs to like have something to do to generate some income. And I may be off on that, but that's like the impression that I'm getting here. I don't know. So let's see. I'm trying to find the spot here. So he goes and tries to talk to some women, and there's one in particular that immediately sort of jumps to him and is like, would you like to take a walk in the garden? And for a moment, he's sort of like, this could be a setup, but he seems to get the picture pretty quickly. And when he goes out with her, he gives a heads up to the people who are like watching him to just let them know, like, don't interrupt me, but FYI, I'm not going to be in the building, so just keep track of me. So there is this deserted pavilion, and this is where the hot lady is, Rian Degtiar. I am not going to get this fucking name right. Rian Degtiar. That is so tricky. I don't know why. So she's still in her like little bubble, and she does that thing that, if you have watched 30 Rock, is part of Jack Donaghy's recommended tactics for negotiation, where it's a very funny sequence. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, I do recommend a quick YouTube search because the scenes are funny. But one of them is not starting the conversation, sitting in silence and letting the other person be the first to talk and break the ice. Allegedly, this is meant to reveal which of you is sort of the weaker party. Like, if they can't stand to let the silence stretch and they need to fill that silence by speaking, it shows a kind of nervousness on their part. And that's the sort of thing where I want to be like, I don't think that's necessarily what it means, but I say that because I would absolutely be the first one to talk. And I don't want to admit that a lot of that comes from social anxiety and just wanting to like immediately feel a little bit more in control of the situation and to feel like I'm setting the other person at ease as well. So probably that is true. So he lets her go first. And essentially, she's trying to hope that he doesn't know what this is yet. And when he reveals that he does know what this key is, she's like, whoa, Jesus, you obviously researched this because you want to hold it over me. And I don't have anything to offer you. I don't have any money. I don't have military secrets. And she's insisting when he's asking, like, I want to know how this wound up in my hands, that it's none of his business. And he's returning with, babe, it is. Something is a setup here. This is very clearly not an accident. So you can tell me all you want that it's none of my business, but somebody fucking made it my business. So we're going to have this conversation. And he's coming at her. It's not like he's super aggro, but he is a lot, his tone changes after he gets his first request. So he first starts with like, are you the one that murdered Baalura? And she's like, no, and I didn't drive him to his death. If anything, you're responsible. That may be so, and if it is, I must know. And she keeps like, she's saying, you are horrible. I'm not, just kind of trying to put him off. And it was a real tough call for me, you guys, because the way that this whole conversation goes, you could interpret it very easily and understandably as just her being completely out of her depth. And I think that is the case. But if you wanted to be suspicious about it, you could see this as somebody really playing dumb. And I don't really think that's what's going on here. But it occurred to me that she may know more than she is sharing, and that especially once he sees what she looks like, that he is like predisposed to give her a lot more benefit of the doubt on this than she might deserve. Because let's face it, guys, pretty privilege is a thing. And we are sort of oftentimes programmed to give more of a benefit of the doubt to attractive people. It's a weird thing where it can go either way. We can give them more benefit of the doubt, or for our own other reasons, we can instantly suspect them of things as well. It really, really depends on like the context and who we are. But yeah, let's eventually He says, look, I'm just going to tell you what the fuck happened on our end. And he gives her the whole story, asks her when she first noticed that it was missing. And she said, like, the day that you wound up with it, apparently. So let's see. But I went to see the Ba in the morning. The whole sorry story came out then. The Ba was trying to take the great key to someone and entered into the wrong docking bay. Then someone was supposed to supply a personnel pod, and someone was waiting on a ship in orbit. I didn't say that. It did make him feel faintly guilty to be badgering the distraught old lady so, even if possibly for her own good. And I love that. He calls her an old dragon later on as well. And she tells him that the story that Balura gave her was that he was attacked by 6 soldiers and that they insulted the celestial lady. The whole thing, it's just, very... he overplayed it, in my opinion, but okay. It confessed to me, and I came to you to humble myself. Why didn't the Ba confess to you the night before? I don't know. So while you said about your retrieval task, Balura cut its throat. Why not at least wait to see if you could coax the key back from me? Why not cut its throat privately in its own quarters? Why advertise its shame to the entire galactic community? Isn't that a bit unusual? And eventually he's like, look, everything that he saw, or he said, is bullshit. And also, the nature in which he was found, the way he phrases it later is like, there was a great deal of mischief and mockery in that. That does not seem like something he would have chosen to do. And ultimately here, he agrees to give the key back if she will simply show her face to him, because he wants to know who he's handing this thing over to, which is completely fair. And the white bubble faded to transparency and was gone from between them. Oh, said Miles in a very small voice. She sat in a float chair, clothed from slender neck to ankle, in flowing robes of shining white, a dozen shimmering textures lying one atop another. Her hair glinted ebony, masses of it, that poured down across her shoulders, past her lap, to coil around her feet. When she stood, it would trail on the floor like a banner. Her enormous eyes were an ice blue of such arctic purity as to make Lady Gel's eyes look like mud puddles. Skin. Miles felt he had never seen skin before, just blotched bags people wore around themselves to keep from leaking. The perfect ivory surface. His hands ached with the desire to touch it just once and die. Her lips were warm as if roses pulsed with blood. How old was she? 20? 40? This was a hot woman. Who could tell? Who could care? Men of the old religion had worshipped on their knees, icons far less glorious. He knew now why they called it falling in love. Miles was on his knees now and could not remember how he'd come to be there. There was the same nauseating vertigo of free fall, vast exhilaration, sick certainty of broken bones upon impact with a rapidly rising reality. He inched forward and laid the great key in front of her perfectly shaped white slippered feet and sank back and waited. Oh boy. You guys, I'll tell you what. I'm real worried about this kid. I knew that it was likely that the hot lady were all incredibly beautiful. But the way that this dude loses his fucking mind utterly in the face of this is concerning. Like, Miles, at one point, there's a line, if she had asked him to open his veins, he would only have paused to ask how wide. I know that I said just last episode that men act very stupid when it comes to beautiful women. But this, I had hoped, would be something that Miles could intellectualize his way out of, be on guard against. And it has broken right through every single bit of sense, in my opinion. So by the end of this conversation with the two of them, your boy is out here thinking he could maybe marry her. And Miles, I don't know how to tell you this, my guy, but one, absolutely never going to happen. And two, she isn't somebody that you would enjoy time with beyond looking at her. The conversation that you guys just had was so tortured because she is so out of her depth and doesn't seem to know how to, like, not to say that she's unintelligent, because she obviously has a lot to do with genetics and has scientific knowledge, but her mind clearly doesn't work in the way that his mind works. And he has to sort of take her by the hand and show her what's likely happening with him being set up. And in my opinion, Miles is not going to be happy in any relationship where the woman is always so far behind that he has to spoon feed her what's going on. This is nonsense. He just wants to look at her and fuck her. And I sympathize. I do. But you have got to figure out the difference between actually falling in love and just being bowled over by your attraction to somebody, because those are not the same thing, my guy. Not even a little bit. And I'm just, Miles, get a hold of yourself. Jesus. And it's one of those, like, this is, I think it's a line in Sex and the City, and Miranda's dating this guy that she finds out usually dates models, and it makes her really self-conscious. And they do like those short interview on the streets with a few different models talking about the treatment that they get because of how they look. And some of them are saying how it's amazing because you get all kinds of stuff for free and get taken on vacations by men and yada, yada. But then there's one girl who's like, it's when you are trying to date, you wind up with one of two things: a man who only wants to sleep with you, or a man who falls in love with you right away. And I remember watching that and being like, oh, yeah, that's it. Like, dudes really do confuse their attraction for love and get completely overwhelmed by it. And it makes sense, because considering the way I have seen dudes behave, it determines everything about how they're acting. So I could see that power, the force of it, being mistaken for something as serious as love. But I promise you it's not. It's not. It may feel that way because it's very strong, but love is not that superficial. So anyway, she picks it up, she inserts it into this lock thing, and nothing happens. And she asks him, what the fuck did you do to it? And he's like, I didn't do anything. I never even dropped it. What is supposed to happen? And it's supposed to open this thing. So now he's like, okay, well, either somebody broke it, not me, somebody reprogrammed it, or this is a fake. And he says, I feel like the fake, like a duplicate, is the most unlikely. But then he sees her face and realizes she does not agree with him. And it takes him a while to, like, get the news out of her. First of all, this is the only key. So they have no backup. And when she explains, all the frozen genetic samples are stored in a randomized order for security. Without the key, no one knows what is where. To recreate the files, someone would have to physically examine and reclassify each and every sample. There are hundreds of thousands of samples, one for every Hot who has ever lived. It would take an army of geneticists working for a generation to recreate the Great Key. And he's like, all right, so then I was definitely framed. You have got to tell me what the fuck he would have been doing with something this irreplaceable on a fucking space station. You clearly need an ally. It took you a day and a half just to arrange this meeting with me. You don't have time to go it alone. And you need somebody. For some reason, you don't seem to want help from your own side. So he gets just enough. He's like, how much do you think I could make things worse? Think of it that way. So she explains, I am the one person on Cetaganda. Oh no, sorry, that's him. Let's see. It was a long-standing disagreement between the Celestial Lady and the Emperor. My lady had long thought that the Hot gene bank was too centralized in the heart of the Celestial Garden. She favored the dispersal of copies for safety. My lord favored keeping it all under his personal protection for safety. They both sought the good of the Hot, each in their own way. The Emperor forbade her plan. But as she neared the end of her life, she came to feel that her loyalty to the Hot must outweigh her loyalty to her son. 20 years ago, she began to have copies made in secret. 8 copies were made, one for each of the planetary satraps. And he's like, all right, well, then there has to be 8 keys. And she's like, no, she was saving duplication of the key for last. A matter of control, Miles finished smoothly. How did I guess? A faint flash of resentment at his humor sparked in her eyes, and Miles bit his tongue. This is what I'm talking about. You guys are not paired well. She should smirk a little bit at that. She, even in the midst of this being a terrible situation for her, just Miles, look at her actual personality, sir. So anyway, she made me and the Ba'alura executors of her will. We were to deliver the copies of the gene bank to each of the 8 satrap governors, which they would attend together. But she died more suddenly than she had expected, which I'm sort of like, really? She had not yet made arrangements for the duplication of the Great Key. It was a problem of considerable technical and cipher skill. Ba'alura and I had all her instructions for the banks, but nothing for how the key was to be duplicated and delivered, or even when she had planned this to happen. The Ba and I were not sure what to do. Ba'alura thought if we took the Great Key to one of the satrap governors, he might use his resources to duplicate it for us. I thought this was a very dangerous idea because of the temptation to take it exclusively for himself. And he asks her what the political side effects of this would be. And basically, the Celestial Lady was like, we should expand at such a rapid, bonkers pace that we just absorb everybody around us. She doesn't say that explicitly, but basically what she would have been setting into motion could have accomplished that. And it didn't seem to bother her at all. But Miles is realizing, this could have been really fucking bad, and I sort of get why the Emperor was telling her not to do this. So they took the delivery of their gene banks last week at the welcoming banquet. Ba'alura and I succeeded in that part of the Celestial Lady's plan. Each of them, the Celestial Lady felt, would be better if their satrap governors thought he alone was the recipient, and would strive better to keep it secret. So he says, do you know to which of the 8 satrap governors Ba'alura was trying to take the key for duplication? And Miles, when she says no, is like, okay, now I get it. Your Ba was suborned. Ba'alura did take the key to one of the satrap governors and received in return not a true copy because there was no time for the extensive decoding, but a decoy, which the Ba then was sent to deliberately lose to us, which it did, although not, I suspect, in quite the manner it had originally planned. While everybody is off chasing Baryarans, the satrap governor quietly goes home with the only real copy, getting a large jump start on the hot competition, after first arranging the Ba's reward for its double treason, and incidentally eliminating the only witness. It would have worked if only the satrap had remembered no battle plan survives first contact with the enemy. And I couldn't help but laugh because there's another series that I am covering, and that was like a very similar line that came up in those chapters for today as well. And I was just like, wow, everybody is talking about how some, like you can make a plan, but good luck. And I kind of felt like I was getting a sign from the universe to remind me to chill out on the plans. So he's like, I'm going to have to figure out who has the real one. If I discover it, will you let me see you again? We must have some way of communicating. Now, he wants to see her again, just to see her again. But he tries to frame it as like, well, if we're in this together, we need a way, So she gives him a comm link, but it's clearly going to be noticed. So he's like, okay, that's not going to work. I can't give you mine because they're going to want it back. And if I say I lost it, I don't think they're going to buy it. And then let's see. It might be better to play along for a bit. Don't reveal to anyone you've obtained this key from me. I have a funny feeling I'm not following his script, you see. If you can find out anything at all about Balura's real activities in the few days before it died, don't run afoul of your own security, though. They have to be following up on the Ba's death. So she presses her button. She goes back into her bubble, and Miles is escorted away. When he gets back to the building, he is met first. Nobody seems to have noticed that he was gone except for Yanaro, who is just like, I couldn't find you. I wondered what had happened to you. And he looks a little anxious. And a part of me was like, did you have something going on that you were worried he had like discovered? Or did you have something planned to do to him and he wasn't around for you to do it? Like, I don't feel like your anxiety is actually for his well-being, but just wondering. And Yanaro says when he's like, where's Ivan? He's taking a tour of the house with Arvin and Bonello, and they've been gone an astonishingly long time. Yanaro's smile attempted to be knowing, but came out oddly puzzled. And once you read later, it's understandable. He was trying to make a joke about how they went off to fuck, but he knows Ivan shouldn't be able to fuck. So why are they gone for such a long time? That's weird. What are they actually doing then? So Miles is trying to hide his feelings on the concept of Ivan with two Gem women. To his hot-dazzled senses, all the Gem women in the room looked as coarse and dull as backcountry slatterns just now. You guys, I cracked up. Rashawn and I are covering a new Raybearer book called The Maid and the Crocodile. And the term slattern came up in our conversation for some reason. And I was reminded of when Pat Robertson made a comment about how women today are too slatternly. And it's just always tickled me, the use of that word. And so it being used here quite correctly, but also feeling really, really old-fashioned. It was very funny to me. He dreaded the thought of his own next encounter with a mirror. What had the hot Rian Degtiar seen looking at him? A simian, black-clad gnome twitching and babbling? And I felt so bad for him on this because this is such a real thing. Like, I am somebody, as all of you know, who is very fixated on aesthetics. And I know it's not like a great place to be, but it's just part of who I am. And I take my own appearance like weirdly seriously at the same time as I try to ignore it. doesn't really work. But when I am around some friends of mine who are gorgeous people, and then I see myself, it is a real slap. It's shocking, you know? Or occasionally, if I have just been looking at photos of myself from years ago, and then I see myself, it's just that reality that is just a real thing that happens. And I felt for him in that moment, because it's easy to see this as being sort of like almost over dramatic, but like maybe it is. It doesn't make it less real, you know? So Miles is noticing that like Yanara is also watching the staircase and seems very fixated. And eventually Ivan comes down and he's got a sort of look to him. He jerked a stiff frown into a stiff smile. I couldn't help but laugh, you guys. Jerked a stiff, like, come now. Before entering the main room and the light. Lord Vorpatral, Yanaro greeted him. You had a long tour. Did you see everything? Ivan bared his teeth. Everything, even the light. Yanaro's smile did not slip, but his eyes seemed to fill with questions. I'm so glad. Filled with questions. Why questions? Like, he has to know that Ivan has figured it out, right? That's like almost exactly what was said, but it seems like he's not taking it that way. So anyway, Ivan tells Miles, let's get the fuck out because I think I've been poisoned. And when they get in the car, this is so funny, you guys. So you guys know that I've been sort of like tormented by the fact that I have grown to like Ivan so much when he is a sex pest. And I think all of those concerns are valid. But I really have to say, after this, and something in the previous section as well, I think I'm just fully on Ivan's team. I haven't forgotten about his past actions, but I frankly feel some of this weirdly makes up for it. So the thing in the last section that I didn't really give due consideration at the time when I was talking about the scene is the fact when they are talking about hot ladies being given away as good conduct prizes, Ivan's the only one that asks how the women themselves feel about that. Everybody else is just talking about it as like, well, this is how it works. Ivan's the sole person to be like, are they cool with that? Because that feels like a real downgrade for them, isn't it? And then here, he's talking about how he definitely got given something that kept him from being able to get hard. And he's like, they brought me to this amazing room. It was glorious for a while. And then I realized I couldn't perform. I winged it. It was all I could do to keep him from noticing. And Miles is like, what? I made up a lot of instant barbarian folklore. I told him Avor prides himself on self-control, that it's not considered polite on Barriar for a man to, before his lady has. 3 times. It was considered insulting to her. I stroked, I rubbed, I scratched, I recited poetry, I nuzzled and nibbled, and cripes, my fingers are cramped. I thought they'd never fall asleep. Ivan paused. A slow smirk displaced the snarl on his face. But they were smiling when they finally did. I love this so much. Do you guys know how many stories there are where a guy can't get it up and that's like the end of the sex scene, as if nothing else can possibly happen if there isn't a dick involved? This is just another indication of like, yeah, this was written by a woman. If this scene were written by a dude, it would have been handled a really different way. And I'm not trying to say they wouldn't have had this idea at all, but I know what I have encountered in most media, and whether the dick can get hard is often the beginning and end of the conversation. So the fact that he plays it like this, and it like, honestly, considering how goofy and thoughtless Ivan can be, that he comes up with this strategy, it's actually a pretty good approach. It's possible, even though he's concerned that they're huge gossips and they're going to tell everybody that he couldn't get hard, it's possible that he's going to get rave reviews. Like, it may not even be a bad thing, you know? I have to assume these women knew, but I don't know if they were aware of the, like, I feel like they had to have been in on the whole thing, because the way he describes them bringing him up to this room and how they like threw themselves at him, they had to have done that on purpose and been part of the whole thing. So it's possible that they will still say shitty things despite being very satisfied, simply because of the nature of what they had set out to do. But I just really enjoy the fact that he handled it this way. And it's just, it tickles me. It really does. It's delightful. And the fact that, like, as Miles is thinking later, wow, let the punishment fit the crime, or in this case, the trap fit the prey. Someone had studied his weaknesses, and someone just as clearly had studied Ivan's. So I really am curious what's going to happen next, because what has happened so far, it seems to me, has solely been to humiliate them, but it doesn't actually accomplish anything. And it's possible that something has been accomplished that I'm simply not yet aware of. So I am really, really curious what we're going to get, like, as a result of these, or if the actions of whoever it is, Yanaro most likely, are going to begin to escalate, or what. But yeah, so Yanaro's done you now, and he's done me. Third time's a charm. What's next, do you suppose? And can we do him first? That depends on whether Yanaro's merely amusing himself or whether he is being set up. And I was like, okay, because I was considering that. And so Miles mentioning that made me go, maybe it is, but I don't know. I'm just starting to think no. On whether there's any connection between Yanaro's backer and the death of Balura. We are the connection. A couple of Barrayar and backcountry boys come to the big city and ripe for the plucking. Somebody is using us, and I think somebody has just made a major mistake in his choice of tools. Ivan stared at his venomous tone. So eventually, Ivan's like, do you still have that fucking thing? And Miles is like, well, no, I don't, but the deal with it isn't over either. So you're going to go to the infirmary, get tested for whatever drugs are in your system. Probably, if Yanaro drank some as well, it just metabolizes really quickly. So, because Ivan's worried that, like, the effects are permanent. And Miles says, I really don't think that's likely. And he's like, but if you talk to them about Yanaro, don't mention the key, because things have gotten more complex. Alone in his suite's bathroom, Miles slowly peeled off his Black House uniform, now in desperate need of attention from the embassy's laundry. He glanced at himself sideways in the mirror, then resolutely looked away. Ugh, I get it. Not really, not to the extent that he has had to experience, obviously, but like just that overall sensation. How great a deed would it take to get him a hot wife? Very great. He'd always wanted to save the Empire. The Cetaganda wasn't the Empire he'd pictured. And if he defeated the late Taoist Empress's plot, might the Cetagandan Emperor be grateful enough to give him Rian's hand? If he advanced the late Dowager Empress's plot, might the hot Rian Degtiar be grateful enough to give him her love? I just detest that he is thinking of things in these terms. It's not at all about whether she is interested or not. It's first presented as her being given to him like a fucking present, and then followed up with like, maybe she'd love him. But then he says to do both simultaneously would be a tactical feat of supernatural scope. So it really feels very much like, I'd love to have her to marry, but if she loves me, that's a bonus. Which is gross, Miles. Sir. It's gross. And frankly, I'm okay with this as a character flaw. Like, I just want to point out, this is not making me dislike Miles in a particular way. It's a very realistic depiction of a blind spot for him. We have seen it from the beginning that he has a weird issue from his bringing up in Barrayar with seeing women as full people. Despite his amazing mother, even having Elena in his life, he still didn't want her like in combat in the same way as the men, you know, like he just really does have this sexist streak in him. And I think this is a reasonable weakness. Let's see. He needed to prove Barrayar had not filched the Great Key, and the only certain way of doing that was to find its real thief. He wondered if one could get a hangover from excess passion. If so, he was apparently starting while he was still drunk, which did not seem quite fair. And let's see. Oh, right. Lord X, 7 chances of guessing wrong against 1 of guessing right. Not favorable odds. And it ends with, I'll figure something out. So that is the end of chapter 6. I'm really, really curious where this is going. And I really hope that Miles comes to his fucking senses a little bit. I've been gratified at the fact that Elena wasn't treated as a prize for him, that he was able to get somehow. And I do not believe that this author would fall into the trap of making this hot woman his prize either. But I don't know how this will be handled. I'm really, really curious. So I guess we'll see. All right, folks. Well, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you again so much to all of you for listening. Thank you to Brett for commissioning this episode. I will probably be almost immediately going and listening to the next chapters. And I hope that you all are enjoying the coverage. Until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.